So welcome everybody to this first IPN webinar for 2024 around flexibility and funding and how that can support the delivery of impact from research.
Okay, so I'll crack on with just a little bit of background for a start. So there are 11 national science challenges. They were established in 2014, mission-led, and they were funded in 2 tranches, first 5 years and then the second 5 years. We are hosted in Manaaki Whenua Landcare Research, and we have 18 challenge parties covering all the CRIs, the universities, Cawthron Institute, DOC and MPI, and then we've got a lot of independent researchers also involved in our research teams. So our mission is up here in the corner to reverse the decline of New Zealand's biological heritage, and we're structured under 3 impact areas: empower, protect, restore, which I think are pretty self-explanatory themes for an environmentally based challenge. This comes from our strategy. It just sort of captures the way that we look at the science system, recognizing that there's a diversity of contributions from a range of individuals. Can you see my mouse if I do that? Yeah, you can. So we've got down at this end, there's more discovery science, through to this end where it's more applying the results of the research and getting impact and benefit. And they're all interwoven strands, lots of people contributing different parts across this pathway. And someone sort of misquoted Isaac Newton when they were talking about this, and that research stands on the shoulders of others. And so the further you are along this end, the more shoulders you're standing on, because you're building on all of the work that people have done way back at this discovery phase and through the other stages. In tranche 1, we ran a fairly standard sort of MB style of contract. It had lots of details of milestones 4 or 5 years into the future. And in tranche 2, we wanted to do things differently, because we found that in tranche 1, even though we stressed to the teams that, you know, we're flexible, you can come and talk to us about changing things if things change, by and large, they pretty much stuck to their plan. Well, that's what they set out to do at the start, and that was pretty much the path that they followed right through to the end. So we wanted to try and be a bit more flexible and creative in tranche 2. So we looked at a whole lot of different sorts of contracts, and they're sort of popping up on the screen at the moment. They all had lots of different good ideas and good elements, but there were none of them that sort of we could just pick up and use in our scenario. So this last document, the grey one, that gave sort of a lot of good sort of background thinking that contributed to where we are now, I guess. And so there's a notion called relational contracting, and it's a formal contract, but it's more collaborative and more trust-based. And it's not a new idea. It dates back to the 60s. And back in the 60s, they had, you know, the old a man's word was a contract, and handshake deals and all that sort of thing. And by the way, the asterisk for a man's word is this is the 60s, and of course a woman's word is equally applicable. So don't tar and feather me for that. But about the same time, lawyers started to think, oh, we need to get more detail in our contracts and think about, well, if this scenario happens or that scenario happens, and it's all about managing risk. So it became a lot less trusting sort of scenario, if you like. And again, apologies to lawyers for that little cartoon. I love our lawyer, Kate. She's wonderful. So she's helped a lot in this process. So the lawyers wanted to get planning and detail into the contracts, but actually the research shows that we think we're not actually very good at planning, but we think we're very good at planning. So we build detailed plans into our contracts, and potentially those plans are flawed. So you're possibly not going to end up with the best result. And there's research showing that, well, the research that we're doing, of course, brings in uncertainty. We don't research things that we already know the answers to. The unknowns that we're trying to discover. So if you're building contracts out into the future, but the plans that you're building into those contracts are potentially flawed. You're not necessarily going to get the best results. And there are a number of situations that are shown that the relational style of contract will outperform a transactional contract. So with that in mind, we had a workshop with our challenge parties and talked about those documents I shared before. And end of the day, we decided that, well, we trust each other here, and we're actually happy with the legal clauses you've already got in place. So why don't we just split out the legal part from the detailed research plans, recognizing that that's the bit that's a bit more dynamic and unknown. Oh, where are we? And at the end of tranche 2, so that we could direct the research into the questions that we want to answer, we had a big scoping process, and it took a lot longer than we thought, but it was a very worthwhile process. And just as an aside, it generated its own report and paper, and so there's the DOI to it there if you want to look it up. We got lots of people putting in expressions of interest, not just scientists. We were very broad in our call for people to take part, and we made it very clear to the people being involved that when you come into the scoping process, you put your hat at the door. You don't come in with your personal or your organisation's best interest at heart. It was thinking about what's best for New Zealand. And so we carefully selected people to be on those panels. And then each of them produced a report which helped identify the research priorities leading to tranche 2. And just as an aside, this nice little tweet about the paper I mentioned from a guy in Scotland I came across as I was preparing this talk. So it's world-leading impact, so that's nice.
Yep.
This is just a quick summary of some statistics from the scoping process. I won't go into a lot of detail, but you can see we had 237 EOIs, picked 87 people. From the EOIs, that's the breakdown of the applications. That's the people that we ended up picking. So, you know, quite a range of organisations and backgrounds. A lot of time spent in Hui, a lot of time consulting with people outside of the core group. So it wasn't just a group of 8 or 10 people thinking what they thought. They went out and they were tasked with interviewing and in-depth discussions with lots of people to get a real picture of what were the key issues in the environmental research space that we covered. And so this diagram sums up the process and where we've got to. So we start out with a contract. We appoint co-leads. We've got a treaty-led model where we've got both a Māori and a non-Māori co-lead in most instances. So we agree the funding amount and the duration of the contract, and we give them some high-level direction on the research. And then we put that in the contract, and that's where we start from. And so those co-leads go and pull together the right team, and we use the term the right team as opposed to MB's term, the best team, because the best team in an MB view might be the very academically highly published researchers, whereas the right team to get the result that you want might involve, well, that probably does involve in most cases, a broader range of people to bring different skills to the table. And then the team, they go away and they develop up a first work plan with all the details. And the detail is there for the first year and has your regular sorts of milestones. And for the out years, they just put a few sort of placeholders showing the direction of travel that they're heading and knowing that things might change. It's got budget, it's got phasing and all that sort of stuff. And that goes through a review process before it gets signed off. Excuse me, I just had a glass of water. So then they've got their detailed plan, it's signed off, it's been reviewed, and they progress to do the work. And then each March and April, they review the plan. So this is ahead of our annual financial year and ending in June. They review it, they come back to us and say, oh, everything's going well, or this bit's not going quite so well. We've discovered this thing here, we'd actually like to change from doing that to this. And they have that flexibility. So then they flesh out the next 12 months in detail, adjust those placeholders that they've got going out to the future. If their revised plan is pretty minimal, it just continues on through, gets signed off, and they continue on the cycle. If there's more changes, and we've had one or two of our research teams did actually get to a point where they decided, you know what, this thing that we started off, this pathway we started off at the future is proving not to be the best path to follow. So we're going to take a step back and redirect where we put all our future effort and resources. And so that involved getting some further external review. But then again, they go through, the research continues, and then they just work through in this annual cycle. And each year we're pulling out information, reporting at MB, just as like Endeavour programs and the likes do. So the scoping process helped inform this stage of the contract, the process rather. It also helped us identify people who would potentially be good co-leads, had the right attitudes, could bring people together and form teams well. And if you think about it, that circle there on the left, that's a little bit like a traditional proposal, MB proposal, except we've sort of gone back and we've decided, well, we form the team and we pay them to do the proposal development in a sense. And then this right-hand side of the cycle, potentially something like that might work for MB platforms or SIP or SIF, which they currently do forward-looking plans anyway. So that would be something that they might want to think about. It could potentially fit into that sort of model. And so in our contract wording, it's acknowledging that the work plan's not going to be detailed before the contract is signed. So we're working on trust. They trust that we're going to follow through and pay them and approve the plan that they come up with. We're trusting that they're going to do a good job, develop an appropriate plan and all that sort of stuff. And when you think about it, we have a good reason to trust each other because researchers are actually got a high level of self-interest in doing a good job. They're not going to take the money and rest on their laurels. They want to do good science. They want to produce good outputs and papers and reports and engage with end users and that sort of stuff. So there's really not a great deal of risk that I can see. If you've got a good relationship, trusting people in this model, well, we've certainly found that it works for us. And you'll see it refers to some operating principles and values. And in the challenge, we tried to have a bit of a different way of working in that it was more people-based, I guess, not so cold-hearted and transactional as the lawyers might have wanted us to be. And central to that and enabling us to work in the way that we're working is this one of our values is about trust. And I'll just let you read these next couple of screens. They're some feedback that we've had from a couple of our co-leads. So, Kara, when you've read it, give me the thumbs up and I'll go to the next one. This one's a bit longer. So I think you can see from those two examples that our co-leads have certainly embraced this new way and this new flexibility and taken advantage of the opportunities to come back and tweak and adjust and just refocus their efforts depending on what they've learnt, because obviously you're learning as you're going along. And the old model, you sort of tended to just have your plan laid out in the front and you might tweak and adjust a little bit, but it seemed to be, at least from our experience in tranche one, that they didn't seek to deviate too much from where they were originally setting course for. So to summarize, our approach seeks to trust and empower researchers, giving them the ability to adapt as they learn new things, trying to discourage a locked-in mindset of, that's what the contracts say, so that's what we have to do, and encouraging them and enabling them to actually review and refine the approach and the direction and think about, well, is this thing working or is it not working? Should we keep putting that amount of resource into this space, or should we shift resources to a more fruitful area of work, that sort of thing? So I sort of say it's like shifting from a fortune teller mode of, making a plan with critical steps and milestones way out into the future, and then just following that plan as though you knew what was going to be the end result from the start, to a focus on your desired outcomes and enabling active planning and adapting so that you probably got the best chance of getting the outcome and impacts that you would like.